Hey everyone, I'm Paul with MadCap Software, and I'm going to tell you what is new in this release of MadCap Lingo. Now, this particular release, there actually isn't anything that has to do directly with translation, except for maybe some bug fixes. It's been a while since we've had a release of Lingo, and so really what this is it's a chance for Lingo to catch up to some of the changes that have been made in MadCap Flare over time. So these are features that are being inherited from recent changes or changes in the last couple of years from Flare. And I'm really going to focus on three things. The main things that you're going to notice. Number one is the start page redesign. Number two is command line activation. And number three, which is probably it's the biggest changes, has to do with source control. So that's what I'm going to go through in this video. Now, if you want to skip ahead to any of these sections, there's just hover over the play bar at the bottom and you can just click and skip ahead to whatever section you want. Also, I'm going to put a playlist at the end of the video, at the very end, some videos that relate to source control. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I am going to begin with the first thing that you're probably going to notice when you open the new version of Lingo, and that is the start page redesign. All right, so we're in Lingo, and the first thing you see is the start page, and it looks different. For one thing, you got this big banner up here at the top with the blue background. You may or may not see a banner show up on the start page. It just shows up automatically depending on your situation. And in this case, I installed Lingo using a trial version. And so it has this banner and it's letting me know, okay, you have this many days left. And then there are some actions that you could take over on the right side, or you might be ending your subscription. You might be near the end of that. So you might get a different banner and it'll just pop up as a reminder, oh, this is coming to an end. You need to take action. So that's going to show up here at the top. Also, the main pages that you're going to be using in the start page are down here, and they're on the left. Your work, so these are recent files, recent projects that I've opened I've created and opened for Lingo, and they're listed here. Resources, you can click that, and that just dynamically changes, and it's a variety of resources you can access. These are the same things that you've seen in the past. It's just a redesign. Open to open an existing Lingo project, or you can click New Project to go through the wizard and create a brand new one. Now, the last thing about this start page is it is responsive. So I'm actually shooting here at a pretty low resolution. So if all I need to do is just kind of move this around, and you're going to see this flip. The banner is down at the bottom, and these pages are across the top. So if you reduce the size of your workspace, or if you're like me on a low resolution, then as you manipulate things, you're going to notice that that is responsive. So that is one change you're going to notice in this version of Lingo. The next thing we want to talk about in this release of Lingo is the ability to activate or deactivate the Lingo application through the command line. So this might not even affect you at all. It might affect you if you are in a company where you have imaged machines and you don't even have access to the Lingo application, but you need to activate it. And so what you can do is use your command line prompt and go in there to activate it or deactivate it. And so this is for people who are on enterprise floating licenses only. So if that's you and you don't have access to the application, you want to use command line activation, you can do that. So I'm not going to go through in detail how to do this. It's pretty simple, but the best thing that I can tell you is I'll show you to open up the help to this topic, and you'll see exactly how it's done. So go into Lingo's online help. This is the new version, so you just go into what's new, and you'll see command line activation. And this is going to just take you through it. And so you are going to you're going to begin by opening up something like Notepad++. You're going to create this license.json file, simple text file. Okay. And then you're going to fill that with different parameters. And you can read through this. Some of these things, you can see a lot of these things are optional. Some are required, and this just kind of gives you an idea of the format. That's why I want you to look at this, because you can just copy the format and then just plug in your own information in there. And so you do that and you save that JSON file to the place where Lingo is installed in program files and in this directory. All right. That is where you're going to store it. And then you go into your command line prompt and you're going to enter this command. Okay, so you can read through this topic. If this affects you, go through and learn how to do it. And it's very, very simple once you create that JSON file in the correct location. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is the biggest thing where you're going to see most of the changes, and that is several source control enhancements. So I'm going to go into the user interface and just kind of show you around a bit, but I'm also going to refer you at the end to some other videos where I go into far more detail and you can learn all about it. So I have this Lingo project open, and this one is bound to Git. And one of the things that you're going to see if your project is bound to Git are some icons and some information down here in the lower right. So you can see I got this icon, another icon, some numbers next to them. Feature 1 in this case is shown. These are little shortcuts that kind of coincide with what you see in the source control ribbon. So this first one has to do with commits. So if I start making a change in here, you're going to see the number change depending on the different files that I make changes in. So if I make changes in one file, you're going to see a 1 here. If I go to another file, make some changes, save, you're going to see a 2 here. And it just is a quick reminder that, oh, hey, you got some changes. You got to make some commits. You're not done. And so I really like having that on. If you don't want it on, you can go to the view ribbon, hide the status bar, and you won't see it. But I like to have that on. So this first one, yeah, that has to do with commits. So for example, if I go into this file right here, and I don't speak French, so I'm just going to type blah, 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 which if I were to try to speak French, that's how it would sound. And if I save, you might need to go up into the source control ribbon and click refresh. And you're going to see, all right, the number has changed 1. And I can click that. It's going to open up the source control explorer over here. And if pending changes isn't selected, you just go find it and you enter your commit comment in here. I'm just going to type my changes. And you can see down below, oh, yeah, that's the file. And commit included. As soon as I do that, look down here in the lower right, you're going to see a 1. That 1 is next to that up arrow, which means, hey, you've made a commit, but you still need to transfer that. You need to push that from the local repository, Git repository, up to the remote. And if I had some changes on the remote repository that I needed to get, you would see a number next to the down arrow. And I can just click that. It's going to open this up, click OK, and it's going to go through the motions of a synchronize. That's the same as this button up here. The commit is the same as this button right there. And so it's going to pull changes first from the remote repository. And once it's done trying to do that, then it's going to push my changes upstream, just the one change. Once it's done with that, that number goes back to 0. This area over here on the right has to do with a branch. So if you're not using branching, these videos I'm going to refer you to at the end, they go over all things source control, including branching. Branching is really cool. If you're not using it, you should look into it. And I have 2 branches right now, so I can click on that down arrow, and you can see I have a master branch and one that's called feature 1. And so if I had more branches, they would be listed here, and I could switch from one branch to the other. Notice as I select master, that's my other branch, it's going to switch to the master branch, and I don't have the changes in the file in that branch. And so you don't see the blah, blah, blah in here. Okay, now another thing that you can do is go click on the face of this button and open up the branch management dialog. And this is really useful because you can see really quickly, all right, what are the branches I have locally? And I just have these two. You can click on the remotes tab and you can see that they also exist remotely. I could have a remote branch in here, let's say origin feature 2, but I don't have it locally. Maybe some other person on the team created it and I want to get it. So then I would select that and I would select switch, and then that would pull it in, pull it down, and and it would be listed under locals. So some changes there to the branch management dialog, which are really useful. Another thing you're going to notice with source control, and this has to do with not just Git, but all of the providers that are supported, Subversion and TFS and Perforce, Helix Core. And that has to do with some changes that relate to bind detection and disabling and unbinding providers. So I'm going to go to the File Options. And in here, in your Options dialog, you got the Source Control tab. And we've got bind detection. Now, this has been in there, but there are some changes to it. Bind detection just means if you've had a connection, a binding to source control, it's going to, if it's selected next to your provider, it'll recognize that. So if you've had a binding previously to a provider, it will just recognize it. And this is going to be on for Git automatically. It'll be off for the others unless you bind to them using the Lingo interface. But the thing about binding to projects is, yeah, you can bind to projects using the Lingo application, but you can also use third-party tools. So they may not be, automatically enabled if you do that. Now, another thing that is sort of related to the bind detection, at least for Git, has to do with disabling providers. Now, I'm going to go, there are a couple places where you'll see this. One is in Project Properties, File, Project Properties, and you go to the Source Control tab, and you're going to see this check mark enabled. And so you can see I'm bound to Git, and it is enabled. So what that means is if it's enabled, I'm going to see this source control ribbon, and I'm going to be able to see the source control explorer, all that UI. The other place where you can see that that checkbox is here in the source control explorer. You go to settings and you can see it's right there. So either place you could disable a provider. Why would you want to do that? Well, some people like to work outside of, they like to use source control outside of the Lingo application. So they don't even want to see the source control explorer. They don't want to see the source control ribbon, and they just want to, they just want to do the translation in here, but they want to do the source control tasks in a third-party tool. So you could hide all of that source control UI by disabling it. Now, if you are bound to Git, you can go back to that options dialog, and you could do it for, you might have, several projects that you are bound to Git, and you want to disable it for all of them. You can deselect this bind detection in here, and that'll quickly do it for all of them. That's just for Git. That'll work. But otherwise, you go into one of these places and you disable it. That's if you don't want to see the UI. The bind detection, I talked about that a little bit ago. The other thing I want to point out about that is that doesn't mean if you leave it enabled, you can still work in a third-party tool to do your source control tasks. Lingo's not doing anything automatically. It's just recognizing that binding, but it's not going to do any actions unless you tell it to do those actions. Now, there's also this unbind provider option in here. that you will also see in the project properties. And so you would use that if you just want to completely sever the binding between Lingo and that provider. You can use that. Another thing that you're going to see if you are bound to Git, look in the Source Control Explorer, go down to the bottom. There is what's called forget and ignore file that kind of travels with your project files. And that's a really important file that tells the source control, hey, I want you to recognize changes in all these files, but there are certain things, folders and things that shouldn't be involved in source control at all. So you should have an ignore file. And if you bind to source control using the Lingo interface, you'll automatically get it. It'll already be set up for you. But if you bind outside of Lingo, you need to add it. And so this button would actually say create ignore file, and you can click that and create it. But even though Lingo creates it automatically for you, or if after you create one on your own, you can click this and it'll open it up, and you can actually manually make changes to it if you need to. And again, that option is also available in your project properties. It's right down there at the bottom. So that is a really, really quick demo of some of the source control enhancements that have taken place. Now, you want to dive deeper into this. Maybe you're not that familiar with source control at all. Maybe you don't know about branching, or you just want to kind of explore. Well, what I would do is go look at the Flare videos that have to do with source control. I have a whole series on source control, and starts at the beginning, the introduction to source control, how to bind, going through all these things. There are videos on branching specifically. It takes you through dealing with conflicts, all of that stuff. So I'm referring you to those videos because the UI is exactly the same. It's just that in Lingo, you're creating translation strings. In Flare, you're creating content, but otherwise it's exactly the same. So go into those videos, watch that if you really want to get a handle on a lot of the details of these new things, as well as just source control in general. That's what I would do. Okay, that is a quick look at the new things in this release of MadCap Lingo. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.